who is the gutsiest and maybe best sabotage drop of week 12. That more this week on the couch, Alan Seslowsky. I'm so in a rush because I want to talk sabotage drops with my dear friend Alan. Who's the one that you're thinking, do I have the guts to do it? I think I do.
I love in the on the couch and football guys universe, sabotage drop doesn't even need explanation. First of all, right?
Right.
It's such a unexplored edge in fantasy football that you guys have figured out, and you always get that question: what's the biggest edge in fantasy football? And people talk about all these under the hood metrics that nobody understands for the most part, but this is it. How do you put a player on the waiver wire that people are going to use their fab dollars and clog up their rosters so you can have an advantage when the next hammer running back comes about? And this would take stones. I mean, I'm talking about boulder size stones, Sigmund Bloom. But how about Brian Thomas Jr., who has been too good to bench, not good enough to start, certainly can't cut him, and has basically ruined your fantasy season? And if you are one of the top 8 teams trying to figure out how to become a top 6 team and you're still alive with your first round pick, Brian Thomas Jr., maybe you put him out there. Maybe you figure out anyone that wants to trade anything of value for him, but he still has that name cachet where even though he's delivered nothing for fantasy football, and he's a little banged up too, that this could be the ultimate sabotage drop.
Yeah. And ultimate, I think in this case, I can't remember the name of the professor at Syracuse, a comparative religion professor who said, we overuse superlatives. And I say, and I think that in this case, I'm not going to scold you for that, Alan, because what makes it ultimate is he was a first round pick, right? You don't drop your first round pick, right? And I think that you're right to consider this because, okay, I want to take a step back, and you're right. I should actually explain sabotage drop. Not that people don't understand. Paul Charchian, I was going to give the nod to Paul Charchian, who coined the term. And I made this speech once before a few weeks ago. I'll say it again. I think sabotage drops are a wonderful, unexplored way to take risks in fantasy football that have a wide range of outcomes that you can watch and kind of keeps you entertained. Because, and you mentioned roster clogging, and you mentioned spending fab bucks, but the most wonderful outcome for a sabotage drop would be that the team uses him and they sabotage their lineup. Because what is overlooked about the idea of a sabotage drop is it doesn't mean this player isn't going to have fantasy value. It means the player's fantasy value is going to be so unpredictable and so sporadic that you are going to get tricked into believing in him and playing him, and then it's actually going to revert back. And that's why sabotage drops, that's the upside of sabotage drops that is unexplored, is it actually really, the intermittent players that where there's no rhyme or reason are hurting you. They're hurting you because unless you have a crystal ball, and we all do, right? That's why we're in this industry. So I think with Brian Thomas Jr. specifically, I'll make the case that, and you and I talk outside of work. And I had mentioned to you that I flipped Brian Thomas Jr. for Jamison Williams in a best ball dynasty. It was right before Dan Campbell took over play calling in a best ball dynasty league, pros versus Joe league I'm in. And part of the reason I was so compelled, I was trying to shop Brian Thomas Jr. for a couple of weeks, but to no avail. But then, when it was revealed like he wasn't out for the year or whatever, then talks could open up again. And here's where I'm at with Brian Thomas Jr., especially in Dynasty. Because I think in redraft, I mean, it doesn't even necessarily take the stones you said it takes, because just look at his scores. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like Bob Harris says, divorce the name from the numbers. And if you just look at Brian Thomas Jr.'s numbers,
Impossible.
I mean, if not dropping him, like he's like, well, I guess if I have to play him. But things have changed, right? Travis Hunter was the number one receiver going into the bye, and he was going to be the number one receiver coming out of the bye, and then he tore up his knee in practice. And you would think like, okay, well, let's redeploy and think like, what can we do with Brian Thomas Jr.? And no, they trade for Jacoby Myers. And when they traded for Jacoby Myers, they said, this is not a rental. This is not a short-term thing. And immediately Jacoby Myers has chemistry with Trevor Lawrence that Brian Thomas Jr. has not had. And I think we even had something during the bye about like fielding calls for Brian Thomas Jr. or, just one of those vague speculation things that makes you wonder, well, this is probably coming from somewhere. So I don't even think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be on the team. I don't think he fits with Liam Cohen. I think we've seen that the role they envisioned for him, it's just not happening. And we've also seen that Mac Jones is actually decent. And that run of production might be like Jacoby Brissett and Michael Wilson last week.
Yeah, but if Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't fit what you're doing, maybe what you're doing is not 100%. I mean, I hear what you're saying, though, because even Antonio Brown in his perceived peak was traded for, a very late round picks. Now, do you even remember what my reaction was when you told me that you traded away?
No.
Well, when you told me you traded away Brian Thomas Jr. for Jamison Williams in your nicely, even I said, what did you do that for, man? I thought about it, for example, and I was like, oh, wait a second, I'm falling for the name brand thing, right? And then what happens that week? Jamison Williams comes out, has the big time game. It was either Brian Thomas was on like a bye or he was injured, or just another zero collected. But yeah, man, like you said, the sabotage drop is good. It works in all facets of life. I remember years ago, Sigmund Bloom, in my in the 90s, I was dating this very very good looking girl. Way above. I'm telling you,
I didn't think you were going to go in this direction with this, Alan.
Yeah, and there was something a little off with her, right? And I definitely should not have been with her. It looked like I was a troll next to her. I mean, that's how good looking this girl was. But I sabotaged, dropped her. She ended up marrying a famous rock star.
Whoa.
Right? Yeah, and then that marriage turned to disaster. I mean, you want me to use names? I can name.
No.
Okay.
No. I want
Okay.
because I want everyone.
I meant the name of the rock star.
Yeah, but I want people get. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't edit you. If you want to say the name of the rock star, I'm not liable for any liability.
Yeah, she ended up marrying Chris Cornell.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Well, that kind of feels like a gut punch because of Chris Cornell's story.
Yeah, he tragically passed away and all that stuff. But yeah, no, she was ready. But it was a sabotage drop by me, which at the time, she was BTJ to me. She was this, sexy, but I don't know. There was something for me, and it could have been my fault. I'll accept that.
Right.
It just wasn't good for me. So sabotage drop works in life. It works in fantasy football.
You just went. I mean, I think only Matthew Berry has made On the Couch more on the couch than you just made it. And I'm not even charging you. I'm not your analyst, but at the same time we were going there. But at the same time, it's also kind of like humble brag, rocks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. I tell everyone that story that'll listen.
Yeah, it's and my similar story doesn't have to do with a rock star. It has to do with oh man, see, I could do some on the couch stuff here because like I have such low self-esteem. And
welcome to the club.
And I kind of I think they can pick us out, Alan. And there was somebody that I was romantically involved with in college, and it wasn't good. And then she started hanging out with a friend of mine, and I remember calling him and telling him, and she could actually hear me on the phone telling him like, "You go run like bad. Go. Okay, all right. Well, this is fun for us, but probably not fun for the people that want to hear about fantasy.
I disagree. I hear people Googling Chris Cornell girlfriend right now. I can hear them.
Right. They're gonna debunk you. They're gonna like snopes you. Okay, let's try to do like sort of lightning round and talk about other players. I've got a list, and then like you can bring up anybody else about sabotage drops because I really want to make this a thing where like like having the guts to drop a player who might be useful, if you're right, can be just as satisfying as making a good trade. Okay, Caleb Williams.
Yeah. So, by the way, the downside of sabotage drop is that you can really look like a fool.
Sure.
Right? Like, yeah. For many years,
just
I looked like
a
fool. Right. For many years, I looked like a fool that she married a very rich, successful man, and that I'm scraping by. No, but yeah, Caleb Williams. I mean, you're talking about super flex stuff because there's always another quarterback, right? You can always start Tyler Shook. The opportunity cost of the sabotage drop is not that bad for you. And, you know what you're getting with Caleb Williams. You can take the good with the bad. I mean, sure, if there's someone else that in single quarterback leagues, it's whatever. But Caleb Williams, it's fine to drop him, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like they're getting better every week as they go along, and I'm still holding on to him.
Well, and I'm talking about 1 QB leagues, because in 2
Yeah,
QB leagues, I mean, he's a fine quarterback too for, like, the ups and downs.
yeah,
He's your quarterback too. The reason I'm bringing him up, Alan, in, 1 quarterback leagues is just a straight up drop, is, he's inconsistent. Again, you might think you can catch that good week, but then I look at his schedule, and I think this might, and I'm not saying, and really DJ, I should have included DJ Moore in this, because
mm,
now Luther Burden has stepped up. I'm not saying that Rome Odunze is a sabotage drop, because he's just demonstrated such a high ceiling this year that I can't accidentally give that to somebody, but this also affects him. This is the Chicago schedule. All right. They have Pittsburgh. They have Pittsburgh this week. And, Pittsburgh sometimes has lapses. Okay. But listen to the next 4 weeks: at Philly, at Green Bay, and then Cleveland comes to Chicago, and then Green Bay comes to Chicago.
yeah, that's bad. That's a murderer's row right there, and it's again with if so you think like if you threw Caleb Williams, like if you're working with Caleb Williams and Jared Goff, I know that's a very
Right.
popular combination that people have. Sure, you can throw him out there. Somebody's going to pick him up, but that's the you know what you might be right. That's the ultimate sabotage drop because what did we say after is that you could be burned by that and you have to be okay because Caleb Williams, we've already seen he's got 40-point fantasy upside. Now those defenses are probably a little bit ones that we want to avoid and prohibitive, but man, I don't know. I still like the chances of that offense to hit ceilings every
Yeah.
week. It's been unpredictable. So sure, if you're talking about the volatility of a player, which is how you defined it, then he's the ultimate
And
at that position.
and I think it filters down to his targets, I'm afraid to say. 6 guys got at least 3 targets last week. So that's how you gonna, and he's inconsistent. Okay.
Right.
Should you hang on to Garrett Wilson to see what happens, see if he's even gonna come off of IR?
Right. So you would be like, but think about what the options are, right? Like that would be a great sabotage drop because he is definitely getting picked up, right? Like there is no way that 8 other managers, because you figure 2 or 3 people aren't even paying attention in your league at this point. But let's just say a mostly engaged league, someone's going to pick him up. So yes, that is the one because even when he comes back, what are the chances that he's going to produce? I guess he has produced in these conditions before. But like, pick him up for who? Like, are you gonna sabotage drop Garrett Wilson to pick up Mack Hollins? Is that
Easy.
like the?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a slam dunk to me. I mean,
Okay.
I'm in, like, the president of the Mack Hollins fan club.
Well, that's why I said it.
Well, and I think that what is really cool about this is, first of all, it gives me a chance to say that Mack Hollins is just, let's be really simplistic. He's a good player with a good quarterback and a good offense, and he's demonstrated that they can make fantasy numbers. Now, you might say that Garrett Wilson has done that with bad quarterbacks, but the other side of this is, like, we've seen the Jets pass offense kind of erode as the season has gone on. So yeah, I mean, I just think there's no reason in leagues that don't have that IR spot for redraft leagues. Like, it's just, I cannot justify. Like,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Here's that test. Here's that litmus test. Okay, is when you go to set your lineup, and maybe it depends on the other option. We can use Mack Hollins as that other option. Like, would you feel okay clicking that check mark? Maybe Terod Taylor's going to go on it. I don't think so. I'm not going to want to put a check mark next to Garrett Wilson's name again. Here we are again. So I
Right.
think
And if you're not going to play him over the next few weeks and you're not going to be comfortable, and he's probably in the category now where he comes back and you, like you said, you can't click yes on him to put him in your lineup. You need that show me week. What happens when he comes back and he has 3 for 38 on 9 targets? So he got the targets, but just they're all sailing over his
right.
head or he's double covered or he's coming up limp. So then you can't even play him the next week.
Right. Well, or even worse, we don't want to play him the first week back. Let's paint a fun scenario here. Like, the first week back, he maybe is week 14 against Miami, or week 15 against Jacksonville, and he has a good game in the first week back, and you're like, okay, everything's fine. And then they
Mm.
come down to the Superdome in week 16, and the Saints, like, Saints defense is underrated. We're going to talk about why I'm a Saints homer. Spoiler alert. And then, so that's what I'm saying. Like the ultimate terrible outcome is, you're like, okay, everything's fine with Garrett Wilson, but we know that week to week, you don't know. Now, if your cupboard is bare, but if you're still alive in week 16 or 17, your cupboard's not bare. Okay. How do you feel about, and gives me a chance to talk about, I hate carrying players who they're by. To me, Alan, A bye is a chance for you to have clarity and say, does this player offer enough to justify using up a bench spot over a player whose value could grow this week? And I think Quentin Johnston is the example of a player that I'm not going to carry through his bye.
You talk about this pretty often, and I think about it is that like the center who snaps the ball in a real NFL game, and he's the first person to realize that the snap has gone awry, right? And I think that with the QJ that we saw earlier in the season, that's not the same guy, right? And it's probably the emergence of Gadsden has a lot to do with that. That there's a certain trust and connection, right, with the quarterback, that the offensive line on the Chargers is not allowing the time that they need to get QJ downfield. And the floor is not low with Quentin Johnston, Sigmund Bloom. It's zero, right?
Yeah.
There's multiple zeros. And there's something mentally debilitating about seeing a zero in your lineup, right? It's different. Like if you see a 3, you're almost like, okay, maybe a 0 is better because it makes it easier to cut a guy, right? When you see that. But it's a tale of 2 seasons for Quentin Johnston. So I don't even know if he'd be considered a sabotage drop at this point. He just might be like a real drop and be holding guys to a bye. Now, the opposite end of that, you're talking about holding guys to a bye. I held Alec Pierce through a bye because he was headed the other direction.
Yes.
Right. So it's Quentin Johnston, Alec Pierce. They're passing each other. They're passing the baton between the type of seasons they've been having at the different parts of the fantasy football calendar.
Right. And some of that is because the Chargers offense without Joe Alt is not able to function the way it wants to function. And Alec Pierce is the top deep threat for an offense that is functioning the way it wants to function. Great game this weekend, by the way, Chiefs and Colts. You're right. And Alec Pierce is a good example of somebody that you can do the mental test and say, does Alec Pierce offer something worth carrying through his bye? And then you look at his schedule and you say, Indy's going to play. Well, they do have a game against Houston and Kansas City, these first 2 games, Kansas City, Houston, but then Jacksonville, at Seattle can be rough. San Fran and Jacksonville, that San Fran game in week 16, I'm really circling, but also this is a team that's going to be playing for like the number 1 seed. And we know their offense has great potential for ceiling weeks in any given week. And Alan, we haven't really even seen Pierce's ceiling week yet because he can catch like 2 long touchdowns in a game when the matchup is right. So there is something, I'm afraid, fear of missing out, right? And I know the other thing is it pains me as a Justin Herbert guy in some leagues that like there are certain offenses at this point, Alan, where you can say like, let's take that range of outcomes that we saw over the course of the season and now let's shrink it to just the bottom half because that's what we're going to get. Like Atlanta, like that's what we're going to get. We're going to get somewhere in the bottom half. And because of the Cecil Lammey windows, like 4-week Matt Waldman, like 4-week chunks, who cares what happened in September? I don't care. It might as well have been last season. It might as well have been, that's the best way to think about these players because we're not going back to September's Chargers offense. It ain't happening. I brought up the Falcons. Is it overreacting to try to make a move with Bijan Robinson this week, coming off of a big week, knowing where their season's headed?
I've heard you talk about this on a bunch of different live streams here, and I keep asking myself, am I missing something? I know that we're going to Kirk Cousins world right now, but with Drake London, I mean, I'm banking on him missing the rest of the fantasy regular season at this point. I'm not banking him in for even my fantasy playoffs. If it does happen, then that's great if he comes back in 2 weeks, but I don't think that's going to happen. Isn't like the logical step that they go more Bijan here? He's just coming off a 31 fantasy point league. Maybe I missed a piece of context here, but what is it about Bijan or the situation that has you wanting to, tear off him for a lesser option that's on the way up?
Well, this very simple data point, and it's one data point, is that Kirk Cousins started a game earlier this year. It actually happened to be a game that Drake London missed. It was against the Miami Dolphins. Atlanta lost 34-10. Bijan Robinson had 9 carries for 25 yards and 3 catches for 23 yards.
So isn't it that you said they lost that game? So a lot of times when you lose the game, they change what they do. It's like the more dangerous thing would have been if they won the game.
But Kirk Cousins looked like feeble.
He looked dust.
He looked like a quarterback that does not put any fear, just like last year, but even more like without even any heart behind it now.
So what you're saying is Kirk Cousins is below that threshold. Like, the old Andy was there. The Andy Dalton Mendoza line,
Right.
where he was like just good enough to float the fantasy assets. So yeah, okay. So all right, that's a good point, right? Like if you think that he is, well, we thought that about Tyler Shuck also, right? That's
Oh, we
another
hadn't
Tyler
seen Tyler Shuck yet. We
Good
actually
point.
we'd seen him sprinkled in. But the other thing too is like Tyler Shuck has Kellen Moore.
Mm.
Everybody around Atlanta is like, please just fire the coaches. Everybody.
Okay, so I mean, we thought that about Jacoby Brissett, and he's been a plus.
Well, that's
so
fair.
okay,
No, that's fair. The Jacoby Brissett transformation has been something to behold. Go ahead.
Right. And Kirk Cousins, he came in. It was in the middle of a game. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for Kirk Cousins, right? Because I think that he's probably the most overpaid asset in football right now, right? Like he's a $40 million backup quarterback who's not even a good backup quarterback. So we're not going to argue the merits of his value. The real question is, can he be a little bit below average? I think that's if he does that. Look, there's no reason Bijan Robinson shouldn't touch the ball 20 times. But what you're telling me, Sigmund Bloom, is that what are those 20 touches worth? Right. Are they 80% of what we think they're going to, what they should be?
How's this team even going to have a scoring drive, like a touchdown drive without Drake London?
So let's go through it. Who do you want straight up? Which running back would you take straight up right now? Would you take Javonte Williams?
Okay, I mean, so I classified this yesterday. Okay, and I think that I will like this is great. This is exactly I want to go ahead and crystallize this and give people like actionable advice. Okay, actionable advice on Bijan Robinson. All right, James Cook, pretty close to straight up. I mean, I probably would just not quibble and say like, yeah, I'll take James Cook. All right. Jonathan Taylor, you're not going to get. CMC, you're not going to get. Jahmyr Gibbs, instant accept.
You're not getting that one. That one you're not getting because the person's too scared to do it.
Right.
You're going to have to go Saquon. This is the guys that have not been performing yet.
Probably Barkley. Not Saquon. Okay, so if I can get Javonte and a material improvement at my worst spot.
Okay.
I'm
so
on
if you
board.
can get Chris Olave to upgrade that
Mack Hollins, whatever. Yeah. The Brian Thomas Jr. spot. Right.
You can get this. We always make fun of like people that give trade advice because like no trades ever get done in redraft.
These can get done.
Right. This can get done. This is a real one right here.
I'm open to Kyron Williams. Again, with that additional big improvement, like a multi-point improvement somewhere else. I'm open
Derrick
to
Henry?
That. Absolutely, Derrick Henry. With that, now Derrick Henry may be a moderate improvement. It doesn't have to be like a big significant improvement, but a moderate improvement. I'm open to these things because I just think that, and I think the crystallizing the question is, will Kirk Cousins play better than he did, earlier this year? And maybe, but I mean, just know that when you're not cashing in Bijan Robinson at his current value coming off of a big game, you're counting on Kirk Cousins. I mean, your Kirk Cousins is the one who's going to determine whether your running back one is a running back one during the fantasy playoffs.
Well, I have learned better than to tell you that you're nuts. This is the craziest, the dumbest advice, because every time I seem to do that with you, Sigmund Bloom, you seem to dunk on me and,
but I do some terrible things too. I've done some terrible things too.
Yeah, but these bold moves though, the problem is I haven't thought through them and you've been thinking about them, right? Like,
sure.
And yeah, so I'm going to, you never, the way they say, never trust the experts, but I'm going to trust you that this isn't a wild move. So, the Bijan thing, it's like you said, this is not a bet on Bijan in any shape, way, or form. This is a Kirk Cousins is below the level of a quarterback that can keep his key fantasy assets producing at a high level.
And I will add in without Drake London and on a team that might be about to fracture. On a team that might just be running out of gas and saying, like, again, the Raheem Morris era is over, the Zach Robinson era is over. Everyone's still there, but they know like changes are coming, and that can be just crippling for a team.
And let's add the kick in the gonads here is that Atlanta doesn't even have their first round pick. The Rams possess Atlanta's first round. The
Right.
Rams have Atlanta's first round pick.
I
So
know.
yeah, man, that is the lower they go. The Rams, if they win a Super Bowl, might have pick 6 or pick 9.
I know.
Yeah.
That I'm not saying James Gladstone. James Gladstone came from the Rams. The Rams are just killing it as an organization. I mean, they showed everybody how to do the retool, not rebuild. And I'm to the point. Let me just mention this because you brought up the Rams, and I think that
Mm.
uh, I one of the edges in fantasy football I think that we are not exploiting is just trusting good organizations. Just trust them, because I was reflecting on it, and I should have went harder for Tedero McMillan in dynasty leagues when it came out that the Rams wanted to trade up for him, right? Terrence Ferguson is a player I'm probably going to try to get in a lot of leagues this offseason, especially tight end premium leagues. I will overpay for him
Right.
because it was so telegraphed that the Rams wanted him that James Gladstone predicted it in real time. The new GM of the Jags that came up through the Ram system, he predicted it in real time. And now we've seen this year, Sean McVay has actually expressed admiration for Arthur Smith before, and we've seen him now show like, oh yeah, we can make the tight ends big time weapons in our pass offense. And they had 3 straight games, Alan, where the tight ends combined for at least 8 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Now imagine if Terrence Ferguson's getting like 60% of that. What that is for fantasy.
The old Tyler Higbee role, right? Remember, it was like 4 seasons ago. Tyler Higbee went on this like 5-game run where he literally, if you had him, you won the fantasy league, right? Unless the rest of your team was just in disarray. But yeah, no, it's funny because you see that I like that you talked about how the Rams combined had those stats because you can't play, or none of these guys are like really playable because it does get fractured, or you're kind of just picking which one. You have Parkinson, you have Higbee, you have Ferguson, and isn't there one more guy that gets some run as well? Bloom, you there?
Yeah, sorry, which is a little lag.
Is that your lag or my lag?
Whichever one it is, we're back. We're back,
Okay,
everybody. I'm
sorry
sorry,
about
I
that.
didn't hear what you said. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just talking about the Rams. It's great that they have all these tight ends and they
Mm-hmm.
produce at such high levels to combine, but you can't even pick one out, right? Because it's like there's 4 of them, right? Isn't there's Parkinson,
Yeah,
there's Higbee,
right,
there's
right.
Ferguson, and who's the other one?
Davis
There's
Allen,
one
blocking tight
Davis
end.
out, right?
All
He
he does
gets
is catch
catches,
touchdowns. Yeah,
right?
and you can project in fantasy looking forward that if it's a player they were dead set on in the second round, he's probably going to become a focal point of that approach on offense. And we're trusting them to be able to execute that because it seems like they're executing everything else. It's part of the
Yeah.
reason that you're okay with Kyron Williams as a guy. You get Kyron Williams and another significant upgrade to your lineup for Bijan Robinson, because it's not Kirk Cousins now, it's Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. I mean, I think that it would help us all be better fantasy football players, Alan, if we considered that when we choose players for our lineup or our draft or trade for or trade away, it's a vote up or down on the organization that is handling that player to like get the most out of them. And it clarifies things that in hindsight seem difficult, right?
So let's go to these organizational rankings, though. Like, who's our top 5 heading into for the rest of season organizational rankings?
I've already, Alan, man, I've already thought about this because, and let's add schedule too, okay? Because
Mm-hmm.
I believe there are 5 offenses. I think there are 5 offenses based on the schedule, based on the teams, quarterbacks, coaches, etc., that I want as much coverage as possible in my lineup. All right, and I will pull up the schedule, potentially at the risk of making another lag, because I want to be able to highlight how the schedule plays into this. All right,
Okay. But
so
even for next year, like, like
sure.
I'm
Oh,
I'm I'm
sure.
buying into this. I'm
Yeah,
buying into this. Like, this
yeah.
theory is great because we all know what happens when you draft a Jet. Like, we always make fun of the Jets as being one of the
Right.
worst, but yet we take Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson in the top 30 picks every year.
Every year. Okay, so here are the teams, just looking at it as a window for just the rest of the season, Alan. Okay,
Okay.
we got confirmation on Dallas. Now Dallas does have a tough matchup defensively against Philly this week, but it's at home. And their next 5 games are all indoors. home against Philly, home against Kansas City, at Detroit, home against Minnesota, whose defense is getting better, and a home against the Chargers. And who knows what that team is going to look like by then. And then week 17 is at Washington. Ooh.
Fantasy
Ooh.
championship right there. You're
Ooh.
going to
I want to be
load them
part of
up.
that. Detroit. The next 6 games, all indoors. Giants, Green Bay, Dallas, Rams, Pittsburgh, Minnesota. Indoors, that's why I would probably go Bijan Robinson plus something for Jahmyr Gibbs right now.
Yeah.
Slam dunk. Moving right along. San Francisco. Now, San Francisco, let's just cut it down to the fantasy playoffs because San Francisco has Carolina, and then they do have to go to Cleveland. They have a bye. So the next few weeks, your San Francisco guys might not help you that much. During the fantasy playoffs, Tennessee at Indianapolis, Chicago coming out to Santa Clara. So, I mean, I love that, the way this offense is peaking right now. I think what people might be looking at is look at how easy things were for this offense with Brock Purdy. Everything got easy with Brock Purdy. And then let's talk about Seattle, Tennessee, home against Minnesota, at Atlanta, Indy, Rams, at Carolina. I'm not afraid of any of those matchups. And I know that Sam Darnold, had some problems with throwing to the wrong uniform last week, but everything is set up for this offense to peak going down the stretch. Clint Kubiak offense, they're going to get more used to it first year in it. Last one's Tampa Bay, and maybe they'll save for the best for last here, Alan, because Tampa Bay, everyone's going to get healthy. Chris Godwin's going to be back soon. Mike Evans should be back by week 16. Luke Goedeke, the right tackle, is getting healthy. This is opposite of the Chargers, right? Rams, Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, at Carolina, at Miami.
You know what, though? I can appreciate this analysis, and I think that there's definitely something to it if we're going to try to predict and crystal ball it. But I see this a lot of times, like when we play our Survivor League, hey, I'm going to save this team because I'm going to save the Bills so I can use them in 3 weeks from now. And then what happens? I mean, this is the hypothetical.
Oh, yeah.
The Bills don't have Josh Allen in that game. And you're like, why did I save the Bills? So I guess that's all we could do is project and try. But it's like, my favorite, my eye roll is, and I listen to so many fantasy podcasts. I love hearing what other people are saying and just kind of digesting it. But it's like when they talk about their week 17 correlation stuff with the best ball, I'm like,
yeah,
it's just like, you're better off doing opposite of what you think, right? Because what you think is going to happen is not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's going to be week 17 correlation, but it's going to be like Jalen Coker and Bryce Young.
It's so true.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to happen. So, and you're right to say that the best laid plans of man and mice and whatever this quote is, and and there's time between now and then and in the future. But at week 12, it's and with the trade deadlines coming up for a lot of leagues, this is like the closest we're going to get to be able to act. And all I'm trying to say is I think it's unmined potential territory to make these slight adjustments. Like I was going to try, sometimes I was going to swap Herbert for Baker Mayfield before last week's games, and I was a chicken, and I can't do it now. So I mean, I would, because Herbert, I mean, and what's going to happen with the Chargers. So that I want to emphasize this as far as actionable advice is to say, look at the players you have, look at their, because we talked about Chicago's schedule. I mean, there are other teams where you might look at the schedule and say ooh, how are we envisioning? Again, it's like, are these games matchup settings where they're in the top half of their range of outcomes or the bottom half of their range of outcomes? And I think that I want to drill down to a specific question for you, Alan.
But I'm saying the best point. Yeah, I think the point that just made me open my eyes on this was we now have 3 months worth of sample size, which in football, that's like 3 years in baseball, right? Because the whole season's a small sample size.
And we have that last month, that hot last month. I think it always is good to limit just to the last 4 games if you can. That really is giving us that arrow in that direction.
Yeah. Now that makes that a very plausible strategy moving forward versus someone in May telling me who I should draft in week 17, right? That's and I get it. You have to do fantasy football analysis and content on something, right? But it's just it always is eyebrow raising to me when people are so convicted on this stuff. That's
I mean, that's probably one of the biggest fibs we tell as fantasy football analysts, and I do this. I mean,
Yeah.
in my delusions of grandeur, speaking of like delusions of grandeur, I brought that up this morning. I like to think that I'm probably responsible for this. Maybe it's not a good thing in some ways, partially responsible for, like, you always project certainty, or
Mm.
clarity. I mean, maybe not certainty, clarity. I mean, like if someone gives you a 51-49, like as a fantasy football expert, they're going to give you 51-49 calls, and you can't just be like, well, that's so close. I mean, every now and then you say like, man, that is like, just flip a coin, like just pick one. But you still, like, they're coming to you to say like, how can I separate these two options? If they were
Mhm.
easy to separate, I wouldn't be bringing them to you to separate. And I think that, but we don't enough, like you say, in the off season, talk about how wide the range of outcomes is for teams and players. Because when we experience the season in real time, Alan, we see it. We see how,
Yeah.
like, look at Bryce Young just this year. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that there's an old. I don't know this like off the top of my head, but I remember hearing or reading about an old philosopher named Charles Peirce, or is it Pierce, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And he was talking about that a lot of times that when people bring their dilemmas to like an expert, it's not even that they're looking for the right answer; they're looking to offload that decision to someone. It's almost like an itch they have that they can't satisfy the scratch, and then when someone else gives them the answer, that an expert gives them an answer to their question, they feel like it's been relieved, it's been removed from their brain.
Yes, and I think that the way I've captured that is, I like to say, I'll either help you win, or I'll give you someone to blame when you lose. Okay, I want to ask you kind of a specific question about looking ahead, and this is one where I'm using you to check me. So, if I'm overthinking it, okay, and there's 3 iterations of it, so hopefully we can hit all 3. Like, again, kind of a
Okay.
little bit quick hitter. And what it is like, if you're looking ahead and you're going to make the fantasy playoffs, and you see like who your quarterbacks are, and you're looking at the schedule, do you need to make your second quarterback specifically to contemplate like starting them over your first quarterback in these scenarios? Here we go. Number 1, Lamar Jackson at Green Bay in week 17.
I wouldn't be able. I don't have the stones to bench Lamar Jackson because of the upside, regardless of who it's against. So I don't get too deep into those matchups, except for on the extremes, right? If there's like an extreme bad or an extreme good, maybe Denver qualifies as the extreme good this year. I don't know, but maybe
Right.
Houston. But other than that, if they're in the vast middle of that bell curve, Sigmund Bloom, I'm going to take the guy who literally can win the league for you.
Okay, what about Matthew Stafford at Seattle after the game he had against Seattle at home last week? In week
Yeah, I
16,
mean,
by the way, week 16.
yeah, if you can live with what's with the disappointing outcome, I would just think it would really depend on who your other option is. But man, you just talked about trusting organizations. I trust Matthew Stafford. I trust Sean McVay, and with 2 All-Pro receivers, 2 top 12 receivers on his team. So I would not be able to bench Matthew Stafford in that
Okay,
situation.
this one's the hardest one, and you already foreshadowed it. Because in 4 games against Sean Payton's Denver, he hasn't done anything for fantasy that we cared about. Patrick Mahomes plays Denver in week 17.
Yeah, that's the toughest one. And now, Patrick Mahomes went from being like the QB1 to like, oh no, like he we're seeing like the below floor level Patrick Mahomes for fantasy football. And so yeah, that would be one where only because we've seen it. If you had a better option, like just say Joe Flacco is still starting. I mean, I don't know who they're playing that week,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you'd have to consider it. Although the name Patrick Mahomes, it's like betting against Mahomes. That never feels good.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when we get to the fantasy playoffs, I always do the "what can you live with" test. Like, I give people the "what can
Right.
you live with" test, and it's like, can you live with losing because you played Patrick Mahomes? Yes. Can you live with losing because you didn't play Patrick Mahomes? Ugh, that one's harder. But just to put the pedal to the metal, and I mean, or say the rubber to the road, or my mixed metaphors. I mean, there are some, like, I mean, I brought up Baker Mayfield at Miami. I mean, that one should be pretty simple. Looking here to see, Brock Purdy against Chicago at home.
Well, let me throw this to
Yeah.
you. Are you going to bench one of those guys? Like, is there ever a situation where you're benching Josh Allen, Lamar? I mean, Josh Allen, you would never.
Josh
But
Allen is like mocking us. And the sad
right,
thing is, Josh Allen, there are weeks that you might feel like, oh, I'm not sure. And once or twice a year, he will have that 10 or 15 point week. But then what he did last week was just absurd. It was like a
yeah,
hallucination. It was like a mass hallucination, what he
and it
was
doesn't
able to do.
shock you. It never surprises you when he
Not
does that either.
anymore. Not
Yeah,
anymore. And one of the things I used that game to make a point of, Alan, is, they used to mock like, oh, cold weather quarterback. They actually mock this with Josh Allen, like, oh, he's big and he's got a big arm and whatever, but the fact that he played in Wyoming, which is just brutal, brutal winter weather, and Buffalo, knowing that they play not just outdoors, but in a bowl, like on the lake, basically, like it's a terrible, terrible spot for winter weather. And he threw that ball to Tyrell Shavers, that 46-yard touchdown to the pylon, probably went like 60, and he threw that like he didn't even care, like he was
It was a rope.
Paul Bunyan or something,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, let me ask this. I mean, we've already seen him. He's an apex predator. Is at age 30 years old. Like, I love dynasty football. I know you play a lot of dynasty football in leagues where you're playing two quarterback. He's still the 101. You're not falling for this like age rug pull stuff. Like, age is overrated in dynasty football.
Yeah, well, with
Okay.
quarterbacks, it is. I mean, age isn't necessarily overrated, but you have to know you have to apply it to the specific position. And then even with wide receivers, we've seen like the Hall of Fame level wide receivers, they might not drop off until, 32, 33, 34, 35 even. So you have to adjust that. But I want to go back to what
Yeah.
I feel like there's that Patrick Mahomes thing is a good jumping off point to illustrating things about sample size,
Mm-hmm.
because on one hand, it's like betting against Patrick Mahomes, but when Patrick Mahomes has had 4 games against Sean Payton's Broncos, and the scores of those games were 16-14, 18-9, 24-9, and he lost. The two in Denver were 24-9 and 22-19, and he lost both of those games. So that's no game with more than 19 points against Sean Payton. At what point are you actually making the mistake of expecting a trend to reverse? Because oftentimes where I have egg on my face in fantasy football is like, this is the week it's all going to change. And is that really what you're asking in that case?
Yeah, I just, we the betting against Mahomes fear happened last year in the Super Bowl, right? Like where people were making real wagers. I can't. Anyone that was betting on Kansas City over Philadelphia in that Super Bowl was just like, "Hey, betting on Mahomes feels horrible in the fourth quarter, especially when they have one drive and Mahomes gets that last possession." Wasn't even close last year, right? So, no, your point is a good one, but it's like if you have Patrick Mahomes on your fantasy football team and he has a bad matchup. I mean, now you have me curious. You could check the start rates on all the different platforms. You could see what percentage of people started him. I would be shocked if it wasn't like 93,
Right.
95%. So
Right.
he's one of those guys where, I mean, if Jackson Dart comes back and is still doing Jackson Dart like things,
Mm-hmm.
right? We could, that's a different discussion. It probably won't happen, but are you gonna have the, I guess the nerve to start him like that? I will not. Patrick Mahomes, I'm still in the that he could do it all. He's showed this season that he's back to running the football a little bit, but you make an awfully good point about that Sean Payton and these games have been like almost like AFC North games.
Right. Right. So, I mean, what's fun is, hopefully everybody just makes the decision for themselves, right? I mean, that's what's fun is like given these very difficult questions. There's a few other things I wanted to touch
Okay.
on. Um, uh, okay, split backfield really quick, because this might be something that we don't have to really drill down, but
Okay.
I want to serve the people. Love you all on the couch. Thank you, everybody. All the wonderful sentiments. Um,
Well, fans of this show, no, I mean, listen, I'm a fan of this show. So I was, this is one of those, was it? You there? Here we go.
yeah,
We're back.
we're
We're
back.
back. We're back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said that On the Couch is a different kind of fantasy football show, right?
Hmm.
Like Sigmund Bloom gets to stretch his elbows. We talk a little football. We interweave it with life.
Yeah.
It's amazing that this show it has its own unique lane, and that's why people love it. It's like one of those like little cults within a cult of
Yeah.
fantasy football.
It's the
That's why
best
we love
thing.
it.
It's the best thing. It's pure. It's pure because we all. Okay. Which if we see that Bashal Tootin is back to a full practice this week, which Jacksonville running back would you rather have?
Even though I want to say Bashal Tootin, right? He looked like he was taking over the backfield before the injury. It's like if my money's on the line and I was sitting there and I could only start one of them, I don't want to say Travis Etienne. Right? I want to say Bashal Tootin. It's more fun. He looks more explosive at this point. But I just feel like the right bet is always going with the proven, grizzled veteran. But man, was that looking like it was the baton was passing and they were going a different direction. And I mean, it's so easy to say it's a fantasy football cliche at this point, but Liam Cohen, this was the guy that he was pounding the table for. This is the GM. This is who they wanted, and now rookies are no longer rookies at this part of the season. They are grizzled vets. So even though the cowardly answer is to say Travis Etienne, I'm going to be the coward this time.
Mm-hmm.
The real man answer is Tootin.
A real man, real woman, real people. No. I mean, because and what I'll take out of your answer, Alan, is some things are going to change like this. Maybe it won't be the Jacksonville backfield, but we should be open to still change. To your point earlier about projecting these schedules, we should be open to possible change, if not in this situation, especially as players get more trust, that were picked by the current regime and they're being weighed against players that were not picked by the current regime. I want to just ask this one really quick because, and I'm not suggesting we would start Jacoby Brissett over Patrick Mahomes week 17, but he does play at Cincinnati. But what do you think about this Jacoby Brissett thing? Because it was 3 games of good games for the team and then 2 games of terrible games for the team. But he has been an elite fantasy. If you look at his numbers, he's like a top 3 fantasy quarterback since he took over.
Yeah, I mean, 450 passing yards in week 11 sets the NFL record with the most completions with 47 in a game. A lot of it has come in garbage time, but Sigmund Bloom, those points count in the game that we play right here. This is the classic definition of don't overthink it. And now that you remember, I was like, who's playing Cincinnati in that week where Patrick Mahomes? This is the move, okay? So it would feel ugly, and you're going to feel like such a fool if you get it wrong. But I would say, and it's easy for me to say, let's see what happens when my money's on the line. I'm in a guillotine league where I'm down to the final 6, and I have Mahomes, right? Yeah. So I will be tested if I make it to the end here with him. I mean, I have him as a top 12 quarterback, and that might even Jacoby Brissett, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that might even be too light.
If you do that, please check back in with me because I want to do the cliffhanger for everybody. Okay.
Your friend Paul Charchian is in this league, which by the way, I think he put it together. So
the inventor of guillotine leagues. Yeah.
Yes,
well, that's that's a great honor. Okay. The last thing I want to say before we go off the rails, and this is where Matt Waldman, my dear friend and partner in broadcasting for Football Guys for so long, he was always really good at being the wet blanket. So this is your turn to be Matt Waldman, if you want to be, because I'm excited about New Orleans. I'm excited about them. I'm even thinking of them as a defense you pick up for the fantasy football playoffs. And just to start this conversation, New Orleans' remaining schedule is Atlanta at Miami, at Tampa, Carolina, Jets, at Tennessee. Oh my. They don't even play a game north of Nashville for the rest of the season. And Tyler Shuck looked good. I've made this case already. Chris Olave looks great. Alvin Kamara is going to be rested. They have a decent offensive line, and they have Kellen Moore. So it's the first year for Kellen Moore. I think it's reasonable to expect that their offense could improve as the season goes on. They're not a team swirling down the drain. They're a team that's building something right now. And against that schedule, with a pretty solid defense, I won't be surprised. And the other unique part of the situation, Alan, is that Tyler Shuck can actually play the Saints out of being able to draft his replacement. What more incentive could you have? If he can win 4 or 5 games down the stretch, they can't draft his replacement. So I think they're gonna get hot. What do you think?
So you think that Tyler Shuck is more like he could be Davis Mills from a few years ago? He's going to get a 1-year audition next year, or Will Levis, who got a 1-year audition. Those second round, is that right? Thumbs up. Yeah. I just right now, if the season ended today, they would probably get the 4th pick. And because the quarterback class is considered at this point, and everything changes, we know that, is considered a little down. The problem is that they still might get a shot at the Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson or Dante Moore, one of those guys there. And I think when they drafted Shuck, it was like, okay, if he becomes the starter, New Orleans is like, great, but it's more like, will this be our backup of the future? I think that's what he's playing at this point for, right? Because for the first time in a long time, the top 2 picks at this point don't really even project to be, because if Tennessee gets the first pick, they're not taking a quarterback. If the Giants get the second pick, they're not taking a quarterback. So you'll probably see like a wide receiver and an edge type go off. So New Orleans, I think that they might luck into one of the premier quarterbacks in this class if they have pick 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I mean there's reasons for optimism. Teams are never as bad as we project them to be, and that's what's so great about the NFL is that one year you're on the bottom, the next year you make the playoffs, and vice versa. Look at Washington from last year, right? So I never think that like when New Orleans are 9-point dogs in a game or 11-point dogs, I'm always on them because these guys are professionals. They get paid too. So I'm not as wet blanket on New Orleans. I don't think that they're as much of a doormat as maybe some of the consensus believes.
And just so folks know, to put one last point on this, because I'm a yacht, not a yinzer. I am a yinzer, of course. What's up, Dustin? So they lost to San Francisco 26-21. They lost to Buffalo 31-19 in Buffalo. They beat Jackson Dart. Jack Dart's worst game. They beat him 26-14. They lost to New England 25-19. They held Drake May to 25 points. Things got a little rougher against Chicago. That's whenever the Spencer Rattler benching stuff started. And then he got benched against Tampa. And they did hold Tampa down. Baker Mayfield was banged up. And then, of course, they got smoked by the Rams. And then they smoked Carolina in Carolina, who, depends on what you're going to get. They can be a competitive team with better quarterback play. But I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about, as we go off the rails, I want to talk about nostalgia because that's who doesn't love nostalgia. It's part of the reason we're here. Alan Seslowsky, my dear friend, what makes you nostalgic?
I mean, nostalgic in personal life versus fantasy football. But you know what? I remember the early days of fantasy football. I'm nostalgic for those, right? Like where you lived and you died in one league, maybe two, right? Nowadays, the portfolio players, the guys that max out every contest on underdog. I mean, great. We live in a world where if you wanted to I'm nostalgic. Do you remember if you wanted to practice a draft, you had to go on a website called Mock Draft Central and wait for a specific time? There wouldn't just be mock drafts firing off or best balls nowadays. Everyone plays a $5 best ball just to practice their reps and getting drafts in. You'd have to wait till like 4 o'clock. And then go in there and someone would ruin the draft by taking some like cockamamie player second, and the draft was ruined, Sigmund Bloom. So I'm nostalgic for the early days of fantasy football where you had to pay for live scoring on Yahoo, right?
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people come on your show and they talk about the USA Today newspaper day. I wasn't around during those days. I know about them, but I wasn't around during those days. So I am nostalgic for the early internet days of when I was only in one league. I wasn't in 40 like I am now. And you lived and died, and you didn't have player shares. When people say the share of this, I say it. I'm always like, I roll a little bit because I'm like, I'm rooting for and against every player every week because I'm in too many leagues, too many teams. So I am nostalgic for the simplicity of drafting one or two fantasy football teams and those teams having a lot of meaning to me.
Yeah. And Alan's not a paid testimonial for football guys because that's our thing. Joe has really organized us around the crystallized idea of the home league, and I think that's part of it. Because hopefully these people we have a connection to beyond fantasy football, but also what I hear because you're such a fascinating dude, Alan. Because you're a basketball referee. You were a DJ. You told me stories about raves, and raves I think are a good example. Like also I feel like what you're talking about is like when everybody else finds out about the cool club. For now, like we can't just go and the place is too crowded and the people aren't cool about like giving you space to dance or you know what I'm saying, and that's what has happened with fantasy football, where when it was just all of us that were way too obsessed about something and spending way too much time on it, it was just us, and now it's become this cultural touchstone, kind of like golf or something. I don't know.
Which is good. There's good
It's
parts that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for the financially, as part of how we're here talking about this and things like that. But it makes it feel more like we've lost our way. But I'll go even because you did say you weren't around. Because when you talk about like sports fandom and nostalgia, I can remember that it used to have this thing, headline CNN headline news, and they'd have scores on the eights. I think Van Earl Wright would do like, and other people would like, I'm here with your scores on the eights, and
That was the network they played in airports, the headline news, right?
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And, like, in the prime time era, like, I mean, in the prime time part of the TV schedule in this era, like the 80s, if you wanted to know what's happening in some out of town game, like you might watch, you can watch what games are on in your market, and maybe ESPN would have something. And then you patiently waited. You'd flip over to see the score updates of other games, and
Mm.
and even to the point where like you'd go buy the newspaper or wake up and watch Sports Center, and that's how you would learn what happened. And maybe, Alan, having all the information at our fingertips isn't the greatest thing, because it created a sense of suspense, a meaning. Like it was, like you were like, you were really like waiting, like, what are they going to lead with the Sports Center? Like, are they going to lead off with the, that Dodger Giants game that went to 13 innings last night? What happened in it? And you gave it more attention than now, when it's just like a torrent of information at all time, and it seems like everything just blends into everything else.
Fuck.
Sorry. See, as we're here with the okay, so tell me something. You mentioned fantasy football, and apologies,
Mm.
folks. I think my New Orleans internet's better, but I'll always check it out.
It might be mine. It might be me.
And you're in Florida, so another shadowy, weird place that things don't. It's also very much part of the Caribbean.
You guys have a good editor. They can cut that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what something not from fantasy football or sports that makes you nostalgic?
Yeah, you mentioned before I referee high school basketball, and there's a gazillion more stories with that. But what I often think about is, and this was independent. I love hearing stories about your family, but my grandfather was an umpire, and he would tell me stories when I was a kid, and I still have like his umpire patches and stuff like that. And there was a time during like the '80s strike where he was asked to come up and do a
Oh,
couple games.
wow.
Yeah, but he was I'm not crossing the picket line type of guy. So
Great.
no, I'm nostalgia for like when you think about just like old time sports, and as I'm doing this officiating, people always say, "Oh my God, so much worse now. The parents are horrible, the coaches are
Yeah.
horrible, the kids." Well, it was the same way back then. He used to tell the same stories of horrible fans and coaches and managers harassing you. And so I often think about when I have these conflicts while I'm officiating high school sports, that it's the same thing. It's like everyone always has this nostalgia for the past, like it was so much better. We put the past on a pedestal, and nostalgia sells, and it is fun to think about. I get sad sometimes when I think about we have the same birth year,
Mm-hmm.
and you think about like the music from that era and high school, and putting in your 20s and how great things were. You talked about like and like DJing when I was in my 20s and 30s, that I was in nightclubs, and you think about like how great this was. But I tend to think that like the best years are still ahead of us.
Yes.
Like we have the most knowledge we have right now. We have the most experience, and hopefully you have like your physical health, your financial stability. So as much as I do get sad, I get that gut feeling about like the past, especially when you hear music usually you staple to different events in your life, that I try to like get, because nostalgia makes me sad sometimes and not happy. So I always tend to think like the best years are like ahead of us.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I want to give you credit, Alan, for one of the greatest 180 pivots in the history of On the Couch, because you started out with, "Oh, I'm gonna help you feel better if you feel like people are terrible right now. People have always been terrible. There, do you feel better?" But then you turned around to the best years are yet to come. And let me say to everybody out there, because I've turned 50 this year, and I've finally stopped using denial as my only strategy to deal with like how things happened in my past affect me.
Denial is not a river in Egypt. That's what
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah. And it's not a great lifelong strategy. As you get older, it becomes harder and harder to just be the dog in the room saying, "This is fine, this is fine, this is fine." And I feel you. I really feel you when you say the best years are yet to come. And what I try to do every day, I mean, I don't always do it. I'm not always my best self, is really treat my whole life like a church, Alan. And everything I do is a ritual to honor the joy of participation and the great gift of life, and the opportunity to do whatever, even if it's just go out and pick up piles of dog poop. Like, I'm here, and I get to do things, and I appreciate that I'm here, and I appreciate my ancestors, and I appreciate all the people in my community. I appreciate the people in my family. I appreciate the people in the fantasy football world for everything that they allow me to do. And there are ways I continue to be struck by the idea that the divine, the sacred, the holy is in the ordinary. It's in the everyday. It's always been extraordinary. There is no ordinary. You're not ordinary. Nothing about this is ordinary. Celebrate it, savor it, and it's just it's what I try to do every day, and it makes me feel like the best is yet to come. And you all have been there for me all along, all of you, as I'm looking in the camera. And we want to always provide whatever we can do to help you in life and fantasy football because you're so classy.